Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbyville. You can tell by just spending a few minutes with Jim Robbins that he is quite proud of his 38 years of military service to our country, and we all should be. A veteran helicopter pilot of the Vietnam War, later in El Salvador and Operation Desert Storm, his federal service included mostly Army duty, but he also had Marine basic training. He worked for the Navy, the FAA, and did service in the National Guard. But perhaps his most compelling story is how his life changed in 1998, 3 years after he retired from military service. Please welcome Brian's Jim Robbins to Veterans of the Valley. It's an honor to have you here, Jim. Let's talk about sort of how you got into the service. You grew up in Corpus Christi. Your service actually ended at the Naval Air Base there, so you started and ended there. In between, you said you graduated from Corpus Christi Ray, May 27th of 1957, and a week later you were already in basic training. So it was sort of a fast track from high school to the military. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I woke up and was in San Diego, and like all young people, felt that I was a little bit out of my league, but quickly fell into step because we had DIs that weren't going to leave us behind. And finished up basic training that summer and came back home, went back to school at A&I there in Kingsville, and tried it for a year or so, and my roommate and I decided that we wanted to go in the military, and my family had always been aviation, so I went to the Marine Corps and asked them what my chances were to go aviation in the Marine Corps, and they said slim to none, so I said okay. And David, my roommate, and I, we went and visited the Army recruiter, and the Army said, well, come with us, we'll guarantee you aviation, but not right off the bat. You have to spend some time in another branch. So I ended up in the artillery and spent the first 2 years of my Army career in Germany, and came back and ended up going to Biloxi, Mississippi to air traffic controller school, and that's where I spent my time as an air traffic controller in the Army for the first 9 years of my military career with the Army, and was in Korea when President Kennedy was shot, and then came back home. And my next door neighbor at Fort Hood was the warrant officer, and he taught me into going to flight school. And then in January of 1967, I entered flight school up at Fort Walters, Texas. It was cold, and pre-flight was something that I'd never experienced before. It was worse than basic training in the Marine Corps, but we made it through that. And late in '67, we graduated, got our bars, and got our wings, and then I was off to Vietnam.
In country, and spent just about all of '68 there, early part of '69 as a flyer, flying both Hueys and Loaches. Talk about your time in Vietnam. I know you started off flying medevac, 15th Med. Talk about that, and then sort of what you went on to, sort of your year in Vietnam. Go ahead.
Well, when I got there in '68, the 1st Cavalry Division was my unit, and they were split up in several different directions. Some up in I Corps, and then some up over in 2nd Corps. That's where our main area operation was for around on K. And little known to me, by being assigned to 15th Med Battalion, I was being flight checked to see if I could fly for brigade commanders. They were needing Charlie pilots, which stands for communication and control pilots. And so I got to flying with the check pilot for 15th Med, and got to fly in a lot of instrument at that time because we were in the monsoon season. And so I flew with them for a couple of months, did a couple of missions in the jungle, and then I ended up being transferred to 2nd Brigade Aviation, which was at a little LZ called LZ Uplift, which was south of Bongsong over on the North China Sea. And so that's where I started flying regularly with 2nd Battalion, flying Charlie, and then we started flying a little bit of scouts, and that was just to support that small AO that I was in. And that was my first taste of combat. We were supported 1st of the 50th Mechanized, 2nd of the 12th, and several of the battalions that were assigned to that brigade. And we were holding the AO down as most of the division was moving north to I Corps, up in the Quezon, Phu Bai area, Hue Phu Bai area. And we happened to be in the uplift area when the Tet Offensive kicked off in '68. And we worked. We earned our keep. And then we moved forward after the Tet Offensive and joined the rest of the division up at a LZ called LZ Evans up in the I Corps, which was in support of the Marine Corps at Quezon. And that's where I got the transition into Loaches, OH-6s, and started flying scouts in the OH-6s. And then the division commo officer found out that I was a prior service in an air traffic controller to boot, and he needed somebody to start looking after his air traffic controllers, which was spread out all over the division area, which was 4 LZs in one division instrumented airport, which is LZ Evans. And my job at that point then was to not only support the air traffic controllers, but we also had a platoon of pathfinders, which we called black hats. And pathfinders go in ahead of lift companies to make sure that where the LZs were hot and what the wind was, what the conditions were on the LZ, and they just guided the lifts in. They were the first one in, the last ones out.
Right. LZ, of course, landing zone, just for people
Right.
to know the jargon and all of that. And your job was really to keep track of that everybody had what they needed, supplies,
Yes.
tents,
Tonnage.
move people around, move personnel around.
Yes. Pay them.
Yeah, delivered paychecks. So they like to see you coming.
Right.
Yeah, you were always there. Middle of 1968, you were in the Quezon Valley and then the Aishaw Valley around that area. Talk a little bit more about your job in the last 6 months.
Last 6 months of
your tour.
That was supporting the
Right.
air traffic controls of the division, and that consisted of everything from hauling generators to tonnage to hauling POWs sometimes to even hauling KIAs. And I would move in the morning. Usually I'd leave on Monday morning and I would either go up to Da Nang and then move as far north as Quang Tri, sometimes as far north as the Rock Pile, which was north of Dong Ha. And I just get airborne, make sure that I was in contact with the division TALK, which was division communication section, and let them know who I was. My call sign, they knew what it was. My air traffic controllers knew what my call sign was. So if they needed something, they just call me. I had a certain frequency that I could come up on, and I would keep that tuned, and so they could get in touch with me. And then I just moved from one LZ to the next, making sure everybody was supplied with what they needed. And then when I got through at the end of the week, I'd come back home and then take a break or so, and then start all over again.
I've never talked to a Vietnam veteran who didn't certainly have certain parts of their service that it was difficult to talk about, obviously emotional to talk about. Part of war is survival, and I know that there were times that you referred to flying around the rock piles, that there were times that you had to do things that are hard to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
We went low level a lot, and a lot of times when you go low level around villages, the kids would try to throw rocks up to the rotor blades, and there are just a lot of things that happen that I brought home a lot of heavy baggage with. And if you remember, there were instances like the My Lai Valley, the My Lai Rat Massacre, and so there was lots of things that were going on that you would see and you'd be a witness to that just kind of hangs with you.
Indeed.
And you just never goes away.
We'll talk about that later and how you dealt with that. Okay. We referred to that in the opening in 1998. But I visited with you earlier about fear of capture and your fear in this job. I mean, you were a chopper pilot in Vietnam in a very ugly, ugly war. What was your fear level? Were you afraid, or did you just have a job to do, or did you have time to be afraid?
Well, they have a certain name for guys when they first come in country, and those who ever been in country, they'll understand what I'm saying. But let's just say that they call them newbies.
Right.
And so my check pilot, when I first got in country, he sat me down one day and he said, "Look, you're going to go through stages, and one of the first stages you're going to have is the first couple of months you're going to feel sorry for yourself for being here. But if you'll just take it on, and he knew that I played football, but if you'll just take it on like playing a football game, if you think you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt. But if you go out there and play rock 'em, sock 'em, heads up football, and just try to slap some leather, you're not going to get hurt. It worked for me, it'll work for you. So I took that on as good advice, and that's what I did. And the last part of the tour is you're always wondering whether or not this one has got your name on it or not. Mm-hmm. And once you've ever heard the snap, you think, well, that one was to whom it was concerned. It wasn't to me. So that's the way you play the game. And as far as helicopter pilots in our AO, and especially at First Cav, we were pretty well known. And anybody that went down and didn't get help quickly usually were found with comm wire, their hands tied behind them, and a bullet in the back of the head. So we all had generally personal weapons. I had a .38 Derringer, and my insurance was that it was a 2-shot Derringer, and 1 shot for him and 1 shot for me in that order. Mm-hmm. And so after a while, you just don't think about it. You just do your job, and you have your short timers calendar, and you mark the days off.
Right. And
then you work and you live for the guy that's in the left seat with you.
Right. You had the Derringer, the idea being that
yes,
you were going to take control.
Yes.
Not have someone else take
Absolutely. Control
if it came to that.
Absolutely.
You were one of the fortunate ones that returned, and for that you're very grateful. I know that. I want to go ahead and talk. Let's go ahead and go to some photographs right now. As a matter of fact, these are photographs that are that you have in your special office in your home that sort of chronicles your service. Here's the first one, and these are a couple of pictures: a young man and a man about 10 years older. These are 10 years apart. On the left, when was that picture taken?
That was taken in 1957 after I finished basic training in the Marine Corps.
So just pretty much fresh out of high school.
Yes, and the one on the right is when I finished flight school in 1967. So.
Hadn't aged too much.
No.
Good looking soldier. Still got hair
there. That was in 1967. That was an LZ Evans, or LZ Jane, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. That was one of the Charlie aircraft in the background. We'd either stop for lunch or I'm not sure what I'm doing there, but that's at LZ Evans. I don't know, you can barely see the Derringer. Yes. That's one of the Loaches I flew. That's got an XM-21 system on the side of it. It's a minigun on the left there. You can see it. And we flew with the doors off, and I usually had an observer in the back seat on the right-hand side, and a lot of times we just fly low level and spread the elephant grass, and if we saw a hole or spider hole where Charlie dug a hole in, and he would drop a smoke grenade in, and then we'd move out of the way, and a Cobra would come in and lay down some rockets down or some grenades or whatever we could do. We'd take grenades with us. We just go out looking for trouble whenever mm-hmm. we were flying with First of the Ninth. I usually flew the brigade commanders or the battalion commanders Loach, which was First of the Ninth Battalion commander, and we shared an aircraft, and that was one of his aircraft right there. And then I used that aircraft when he wasn't flying it to support the air traffic controllers. We all lived on the same LZ Evans, which happened to be the division instrumented airport, which was just south of Weifubai.
That's a depiction of a couple of aircraft.
Yeah, that's a Huey in the back behind the Chinook, and this is a B model or it's a C model Chinook. And when I started flying the Chinooks in the 80s, I fell in love with flying all over again. It's just a beautiful aircraft. It lifts 50,000 pounds, and it can carry 33 troops in the back. And it's just a pleasure to be either in the clouds with or low level cross country. It's just, you can tell now that they're using it very, very effectively in Afghanistan because it will take the high altitudes.
Indeed, that's a lot of aircraft right there.
It is, but it is fun to fly.
I'll bet it is. Talk about this. You're receiving a commendation.
Yes, sir. This is one of our brigade. This is our brigade commander at LZ Uplift in '67. I think that's where I got the Air Medal with V during a little operation we had about a month and a half after I was in country. We had made contact about 2 or 3 miles south of where we lived. That day I remember it was kind of raining, and the guys standing to my right, we all were involved in a rescue from one of our helicopters that went down, and Mr. Little got injured pretty badly, had to get shipped back to the States. But there's my partner during Desert Storm, Jim Myrick. We had just returned from Saudi Arabia, and we work for the Army Safety Center as accident investigators. Both of us were aviation safety officers, and we were in Saudi Arabia to do accident investigations on mainly the OH-58s that were having difficulty with the climate and the sand. And so we were assigned as a team to go out in the desert and investigate the accident sites, either take statements from the witnesses or take site pictures and map and try to run down the cause of the accident. If there was a fatality, we definitely have to take pictures of the site. But we're glad to be home.
Indeed. Shadow box of some of your awards. Lots of air medals there. What are some of the other things we're looking at?
Well, on the right-hand side at the top is my ability to use a rifle and a pistol in the Army. That's an expert. Right below that is sharpshooter, what I received when I was in the Army. And the bottom row is the rank in the Warrant Officer Corps. You know, it's said in the Navy that the chiefs run the Navy. Well, chiefs have a lot to do with running the Army too, and warrant officers are called chiefs in the Army. So those are the early ranks of the Warrant Officer Corps in the Army. It goes from W1 through W4, and then the last one there with the 4 bars, that's the current W4 rank, and that's what our retired is. And the medals, my aviation wings at the top, and the medals are the Bronze Star with V, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Medal with V, and 13 oak leaf clusters, which is 13 air medals, and then Army Commendation. I've got a couple of those, and then Army Good Conduct Medal, and then a bunch of other ones that has to do with Desert Storm in Vietnam.
Right. All well deserved. You came home from Vietnam in 1969, I believe it was, and sort of take us from there. There wasn't a lot of flying to do because most of the choppers were in Vietnam. You did a little bit of ferrying duty. You left the Army. You went to work for the FAA, and eventually Desert Storm came along. I want to go ahead and fast forward to that because after Desert Storm came along, your first duty was actually in El Salvador. Is that right?
Yes.
Talk about that duty. That was an interesting duty where you flew there also.
Yeah. Well, I was working for the Navy as an air traffic controller, and my boss came and got me one day. He said, "There's a guy on the phone, and he wants to talk to you." And I said, okay. So anyway, I ended up back on active duty and working for the Army Safety Center, and the beeper went off my first time to go be deployed as an accident investigator to El Salvador. And that was back when the Contra were pretty busy. And the Salvadoran Army and the American Army, who was there from Honduras, were flying the same type of aircraft, and so the Contras were shooting down anything that looked like Salvador, and so we lost 3 or 4 aircraft to their fire. And we had gone down there to investigate one particular aircraft that had gone down into a lake, which was a dormant lake, and it was a volcano which had turned into a dormant volcano, which had turned into a lake. It was just south of Ilopango Air Force Base, right outside of San Salvador. And it was sitting in 230 feet of water, and so we went down there to try to get the air crew and the aircraft up since it all was still together. And we brought in the Navy, and there was a team of 5 of us, and we of course had to again map the area and take pictures of it and determine why the aircraft went in, and that went on as an investigation for some time even after I left the Army. But that was our job, and my job is being an air traffic controller, and my MOS was 154 Bravo Alpha Bravo, which was a Chinook pilot, air traffic technician, and aviation safety officer. So one of my jobs as a part of the team was to talk to the air traffic controllers in the control tower and get a transcript of what was last said, and also to determine what the weather was at that time, and then my job was to make sure that, that all the information was put together and compiled as a part of the investigation. Why the aircraft went down, I don't think it was because of air traffic control. And then the next thing my job was is to go fly with the air crews, because the fact that we were losing air crews and that there was intel to tell that the Salvadoran Contras were in possession of SAM-6s, which were not a good thing for our air crews to have confidence in. So it was my job to go build some confidence with them and go fly them, because we were in direct support of our special forces that were in country who were training the Salvadoran army. So my job was to go fly with the young crews, and at that time I was 52 years old, and so I crawled into an aircraft, strapped on a chicken plate, and we went flying. And as a result of that, I like to think that I stemmed some more motivation, so to speak.
Indeed. Eventually the Desert Storm, still flying Chinooks, safety officer.
Yes.
Talk about your job in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, well, like I said, Jim, Mark, and I, our main job was to go be with the accident investigation team whenever there was an OH-58 that went down, or a lot of times we would investigate tank accidents, the M1 Abrams, but mainly when an OH-58 went down. There were times when I went and flew with some of the Chinook crews, my old unit from Dallas, and a lot of times when the safety center comes on board and they see us in the mess hall and walking around the different areas, they have a little apprehension about that, because they're sometimes thinking that we're there to investigate them for some reason, or to inspect them. And so my job then was to just go and assure them that we weren't there to create any problems. We were there just to support them, and so that was my job. So I went flying with my old 136 transportation company, and it was good to be with the guys again.
Again, you were no spring chicken at this time. You were 52 years old, right?
Yeah, yeah, I was.
You had done a lot of flying. You were in Saudi Arabia about 3 months, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Eventually came home, came back to Corpus, went to work back for the Navy again, safety officer.
Yeah.
For S&S battalion there, and couldn't be an air traffic controller anymore. You had developed some health problems and eventually retired from the Army in '94, and a year later from federal service. 38 years total in federal service,
right.
just outstanding. 1998, you went back to Vietnam.
Yes.
Talk about why and what happened to your life after that.
Yeah, well, there was we all have stumbling blocks in our life, and I'd had a stumbling block in '97, and a friend of mine suggested that, well, maybe a part of that stumbling block was some baggage that I'd carried home with me from Vietnam, and I'd not even given it a thought at that point. And he had told me that he had gone back, and it had been the best thing that he had done, because he was able to leave that baggage behind. And then I was able to do that, and I went back with a mission team, a medical mission team, and we ended up in a place called Dalat, and out in the jungle, and in a retreat area that looked like VC base camp, places I used to burn down and go hunt for. And it was at a campfire one night that the Lord just laid on me to leave it there, and so I did. And on the way home, I just dedicated the rest of my life to the Lord, and that's exactly what I've done. Since then, I've become a hospital chaplain, and I've done the best that I could with my life up until the last couple of years, and I've developed ongoing medical problems. It's kind of put a restriction on that, but I'm still helping as much as I can, either with the American Legion or with whoever needs my help.
I want to back up a little bit, because like I said, when you came back from this mission trip in Vietnam, you got a call from a friend about a week-long course near Waco to sort of prepare you to be a chaplain, or to be certified. And it wasn't as easy as that. You had to go back to Corpus Christi and actually took a 3-year course there at Howard Payne
Right.
a college, but eventually you were certified as a chaplain, and that's one of the things you did when you got to Bryan College Station 3 years ago. Sort of talk about that job, because you worked over at St. Joseph Hospital for Don Breland.
Yes. I did my internship at Driscoll Children's Hospital in Corpus Christi, and then after that I worked at the Bay Area Hospital in Corpus for several years, and then we moved up here. And when I got up here, I talked with Don, and he asked me to come over and help with him on a volunteer basis, and so that's exactly what I did, and I hope to think that I was useful for him, and I still go back and help from time to time, but I still have some physical problems that prevents me to be there more than what I'd like to be. But yes, sir, it was a blessing to be with Don. He's one of my heroes.
When you look back at the whole thing, from when you graduated from Ray High School and your service in Vietnam, and then your service later in El Salvador and Desert Storm, and then sort of how your life changed some 11 years ago, when you take a look at all of it, how does it all sum up in Jim Robbins' mind?
Amazing. Amazing that I'm that blessed, that I could be that fortunate to be able to do that, and it's really truly amazing, and that God has provided so much and has stepped in so many times to interfere on my behalf, and it's just so obvious to me now, those times when I wasn't aware, that now I am.
Right.
And it's just truly amazing.
Right. If somebody called you today and said, if you could do it, if you could be a chopper pilot again and do some work, would you go? It seemed like you loved to fly and you still got it in your blood.
Yes.
If
yes,
you could, you would, right?
Oh, yeah, you betcha. You betcha. I'm on the Airport Advisory Committee for Bryan College Station. For Bryan at Coulter Field.
Right.
So I've still got my hand in aviation in some way, especially aviation safety. So I'm still working at it.
Indeed. And congratulations on doing that, and thank you for your service. It's a remarkable story. Not only your service while you were in the service for 38 years, but what's happened to you in 11 years. And thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Jim Robbins was born to be a flyer. His grandfather flew Spads in World War I, his father B-24s in World War II, and his grandson is in the Marine Corps flying Cobras. You get the idea that at age 70 that he would be flying today if he could, maybe ferrying planes from point A to point B anywhere his country asked. But for 38 years, he flew with honor and distinction, and we salute Jim Robbins' service. I'm Tom Turbyville. Please join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.